Hey there, today I want to do a rant that's a little more ranty than most, maybe a little angrier than most, because today I want to talk about Liz Cheney. This may be surprising to those of you in the rest of the world, but Liz Cheney is the biggest news in Washington, D.C. and the U.S. news media this week. There's been a tremendous amount of focus on this one Republican Congresswoman because she is taking a principled stand against Donald Trump and his control of what she believes to be her Republican Party. To be clear, I agree with her that the 2020 U.S. election was not stolen. I agree with her that Donald Trump's attempts to delegitimize that election are unpleasant and wrong. However, I disagree with the emphasis of a lot of the news reports and opinion pieces I am seeing about Liz Cheney, because she is being set up as some kind of hero on a broader level. There was an actual CNN article that talks about, how cool it would be if Liz Cheney ran for president and how she's about to be unleashed to do battle with Donald Trump for the soul of the Republican Party. Well, I'm here to tell you, and I say this as a diehard Donald Trump opponent, that Liz Cheney's Republican Party is dramatically worse than Donald Trump's Republican Party. And even if Trump were to come back to power in 2024, it would be a better Republican Party if Liz Cheney and all people who think like Liz Cheney were driven out of the party. Donald Trump is an agent of chaos. Donald Trump is a reaction to extraordinary failure. And that extraordinary failure is the failure of Liz Cheney's Republican Party. Liz Cheney is the daughter of Dick Cheney. She's someone who's been in the U.S. Congress since, I think, 2017, yet is already in a privileged leadership position because she is her daddy's daughter. I'm not a big fan of blaming the sins of the father on the offspring. Liz Cheney, if she were her own person, politically speaking, had her own political ideas, then it would be unfair to blame her for things that her father has done. However, she was, because she was in government during that dark decade of Bush, she was not just complicit in the stuff that I'm talking about, she has also not changed her views in the slightest. She is described in her Wikipedia page, and if you read anything that she's said or talked about, I think it's fair, she is described as a Bush-Cheney Republican. This is a person who stands up and happily represents the legacy of Bush and Cheney, which is insane. It's truly insane. As we reflect on things that are happening in the world right now, I am not someone who believes the world is as scary as Washington, D.C. and Liz Cheney would like to tell you it is, but it's true that sitting in the world in 2021, things are dramatically worse than they were in the year 2000. Hey there, I want to do a quick bias check. What I said just there is wrong. From the perspective of the world at large, in 2021, the world at large is much healthier, happier, more wealthy than the world in 2000. Latin America, Africa, Asia, especially China, and India to an extent, much richer, happier places. What I'm talking about in this video, what I'm lamenting so angrily, this is the bias I should make explicit, is the way that Bush and Cheney destroyed an incredible opportunity for the United States to shape the world. I'm a biased pro-US guy. I believe that U.S. influence has the potential to be positive, and that there really was a sort of once-in-a-century opportunity that Bush and Cheney squandered. Now, from the perspective of the rest of the world, like China, other folks who want to exert themselves more in the world, then maybe actually the Bush-Cheney presidency was a good thing in that it destroyed U.S. power and prestige. Like World War I was this horrific event, but it also freed the world of European imperial power. So maybe from the perspective of the rest of the world, Bush and Cheney were good because it sort of destroyed this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that the United States had. So yeah, for the rest of this video, I think I'm obviously pretty biased, and I think I am arguing from the perspective of a patriotic American citizen who's angry that the U.S. ability to shape the world was pissed away by Bush and Cheney. So yeah, just want to be clear about that. Things are dramatically worse than they were in the year 2000, especially from the U.S. perspective. Looking back, as especially happens whenever Israel and Gaza conflicts, Israel and Palestinian conflicts spark up again, whenever that happens, it's only natural to look back to the 1990s and sort of the world that we had back then. But not just Israel-Palestine. Looking at India-Pakistan, looking at, I guess India-Pakistan might have fought a mini war in the 90s, so that's not the best example. But certainly looking at Russia, looking at relationships with China, looking at just the way the world worked in the 1990s. When Bush and Cheney, the father of Liz Cheney, this new hero that we're supposed to think about electing as a new president and going into battle against Trump, in 2000, when Bush and Cheney came into office, the United States was, universally respected probably overstates it, but generally speaking, the United States looked like a bunch of winners. The Cold War had come out in our favor. Throughout the 1990s, this isn't something that's emphasized so much, but under Bush and then Clinton, there was a fair amount of sort of human rights house cleaning that had happened in the 1990s. The United States did a whole bunch of horrible stuff in the Cold War, but in the 90s, it started to correct. It stopped supporting civil wars in Central America. It stopped supporting particularly nasty figures in Asia. Things got a lot better. The world was healing, and the United States was in a position to lead forward in ways that would have just blown the minds of any U.S. president before George H.W. Bush at the beginning of the 1990s. When Bush and Cheney came into office, this was the position that the United States was in. This was the position that the world was in. The U.S. budget was actually in balance for the first time since Eisenhower. We still had a large and growing national debt, but things were actually trending in the right direction there. That sounds like fantasy land looking at the world we live now. Basically, and it's funny, I'm sure that if the right decisions had been made, or if Al Gore was president, we wouldn't have thought that the world was all that great. But honestly, comparing the way that the world looks today to the way that it looked before the influence of Bush and Cheney, it's like looking at a goddamn utopia. It's the more that I think about Bush and Cheney, the more I'm like, these are the people that murdered utopia. Sure, we live to some extent, to a smaller extent than Liz Cheney talks about, in a world of great power competition, in a world where, there's more back and forth. If it weren't for Bush and Cheney, it is, sure, many other things could have happened. It is easy to imagine a world in which the United States was still respected, and was leading a happier, healthier, more unified world into the future. We would have been, everything would have been so much better if it weren't for Bush and Cheney. They really were the guys who murdered utopia. 9/11, let's say that would have happened anyway. that would have happened anyway. And what folks don't really remember about 9/11 is that it made the United States from sort of a somewhat, instantly transformed the United States from like a somewhat admired, somewhat resented hegemon into like the hero / martyr of the whole world. Between September of 2001 and, well, March of 2003, the United States could really have done no wrong. It is a period of time where the United States could have not only used the advantages it had gotten from winning the Cold War, but the advantages it had gotten from this horrific attack that had been carried out against us, that made us look like the victims and the good guys in ways that we hadn't looked since the frickin' War of 1812. This was an extraordinary opportunity. And what Bush and Cheney did with this extraordinary opportunity was they made the United States more despised than it has ever been. Well, yeah, than it has ever been in its entire existence. The destruction of Iraq, the militarization of everything, the complete incapacity that these folks had to do anything other than destruction. They blew up the US budget. They blew up the US economy. It is a legacy of extraordinary failure, and it is also a legacy, the Bush-Cheney legacy, of blaming absolutely everybody else for our failures. We blame the Iranians for our failures in Iraq and in Afghanistan when honestly the Iranians would have been very happy to work with us in Iraq and Afghanistan. I've been reading a lot lately about how it's actually the Iranians that contributed to our quick victory in Afghanistan in the fall of 2001. You ever wonder why we were able to win a complete victory in Afghanistan so quickly, and yet we've been losing control of the place almost ever since? The horrific thing is that Bush and Cheney did is that they were given this extraordinary opportunity to unite the world in 9/11, this ability to be the hero, and instead used it to create a more violent, weaker, sadder world filled with fear and destruction. That incredible post-Cold War opportunity that George H.W. Bush and to a lesser extent Clinton actually did a fairly decent job of building on. Don't get me wrong, they made serious mistakes as well, but it was sort of moving forward. And Bush and Cheney destroyed it. I think Jeet here has pointed out that in Liz Cheney's speech that we're all supposed to be so impressed with Liz Cheney getting up there and bravely talking about the threat to democracy that Donald Trump poses. And Donald Trump poses a threat to democracy, but she got up there. Jeet here pointed out that actually like half of the speech was talking about how the reason we had to be worried about Trump was because of this big competition that we're in with China and this big competition that we're in with Russia, this big competition. It's a big competition that's only any competition at all because Liz Cheney's dad and his puppet president were such terrible fuck-ups. So this idea that like we're supposed to be all excited about Liz Cheney, battling for the soul of the Republican Party, it falls a little flat with me. And the fact that we're spending so much time focusing on that, instead of looking at the ways that Biden so far has been really failing to clean up the mess of the forever wars that Bush started and Obama continued, and Donald Trump talked a lot of smack about changing and did absolutely nothing to change. We should be focused on fixing the problems. Like, yes, I don't want Trump to win again. I am troubled by what the Republican Party is today. But what the Republican Party is today is dramatically less troubling than what Liz Cheney wants to take the Republican Party of today back to. So yeah, good for Liz Cheney making this big stand. And I think we should pay attention to what Liz Cheney wants us to do. She wants us to get rid of Trump and to double down on the just vandalism that her father and George W. Bush brought to the world. That just doesn't sit very well with me. I think that, I wish Liz Cheney the best of luck in her next election in Wyoming, and the best of luck at her, MSNBC or CNN, commentate. Actually, no, she's a legitimate rich person. She won't go on CNN or MSNBC. She'll just walk off onto the boards of a whole range of defense companies and never work another day in her life and be wealthy and happy, advocating for more U.S.-sponsored death and destruction. It's not just that Bush and Cheney went out and destroyed the world. Of course, that's very important and involved 1 million dead people, but it's that Bush and Cheney destroyed an extraordinary opportunity. They squandered the opportunity of the end of the Cold War, and yes, horrifically, the opportunity that all of those deaths on 9/11 gave us, the ability to lead, the ability to build a better world. It's just extraordinary to me that we have a media establishment that wants to create a hero out of the legacy of Bush and Cheney. I don't get it. Like I said, this was going to be a little more ranty than most rants. But hey, I want to get out 2 videos a week, and the Libya video isn't done yet. So anyway, thanks for watching. Please subscribe. Please like and comment. Let me know if you agree or disagree what I have said. Yeah, should be a produced Libya video on Tuesday. We'll see. Or maybe I'll go live on Tuesday. Anyway, we'll see. Thanks so much.